Hello and welcome to TeleSUR. I'm Doris Polo in Quito, Ecuador, and this is from the South. The 75th session of the UN General Assembly is nearing its end. Over the past week, world leaders have addressed various global issues under the theme, "The Future We Want, the United Nations We Need," reaffirming our collective commitment to multilateralism. During Saturday's session, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi reassured all leaders that when it comes to developing a vaccine for COVID-19, the world can count on his country.
Even during these very difficult times of the raging pandemic, the pharmaceutical industry of India has sent essential medicines to more than 150 countries. As the largest vaccine-producing nation in the world, I want to give one more assurance to the global community today. India's vaccine production and delivery capacity will be used to help all humanity in fighting this crisis. In India and in our neighborhood, we are moving ahead with phase 3 of the clinical trials. India will also help all the countries in enhancing their cold chain and storage capacities for the delivery of the vaccines.
Well, addressing the 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly on Friday, the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, Gaston Brown, stressed the impact COVID-19 and climate change have had on developing nations.
The pandemic has added to the dangers of climate change, which is as pernicious as the COVID-19 pandemic in its reach and insidious in its impact. The poor and the vulnerable are already the first to suffer from the economic impact of COVID-19 and climate change. The Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, ECLAC, is forecasting that the gross domestic product, GDP of the Caribbean, will contract by 6.9% in 2020 because of the effects of COVID-19 on our economies. This is
Also speaking during Friday's session, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas denounced Israel's plans to annex 33% of Palestinian land and East Jerusalem.
How long do we have to wait until there is a just solution to the Palestinian question, a solution guaranteed by international law? How long will the Palestinian people continue to languish under the yoke of Israeli occupation? How long do we have to wait until there is a just solution to the status of millions of Palestinian refugees, in line with the relevant UN resolutions adopted 70 years ago? And they will stand up to occupation, aggression, and betrayal until they gain their rights. In spite of the difficulties and in spite of the unjust blockade that aims to undermine them, we will not bow down, we will not surrender, we will not compromise, and we shall triumph.
In other news, Venezuelan opposition parties have submitted their candidacies for the December 6th parliamentary elections. Some members of the opposition took the opportunity to say that those elected in December must unite with the Venezuelan people to confront the economic blockade imposed by the United States. Over 14,000 candidates have been registered to run for a seat in the National Assembly.
Some important figures reported by the directors today. 90% of current political organizations in Venezuela are participating in this electoral process. Despite the propaganda unleashed by the global hegemonic mainstream media, there is an immense will to vote, and 90% of organizations are participating. More than 14,000 candidates in this contest, 105 political organizations. The president of the CNE, Indira Alfonso, has confirmed that in the coming days we are all going to know the forms in which we are going to vote, the biosecurity mechanisms. We have today a culture of care and of biosecurity in the midst of the pandemic.
Venezuela's Communications Minister Jorge Rodriguez to hold free and fair elections without foreign interference, adding that the High Commissioner's statements was aligned with interventionist plans against Venezuela by the United States. Over to Chile, an alliance of parties that support the drafting of a new constitution launched their campaign ahead of the October 25th referendum. The referendum will ask Chileans whether they support a new constitution, as well as who should be responsible for the process of drafting it, either Congress or a constituent assembly. The creation of a new constitution has been a key demand of massive protests against police brutality and growing inequality.
We want to launch and strongly promote the Chile Digno campaign, an alliance of parties in favor of constitutional change, for the approval of a constituent assembly. Today begins the campaign, and we want to show how we work together with social, cultural, and ethnic organizations, populations to promote the approval.
We believe that this historical moment that we are living through is very important. It is the opportunity to throw away the constitution of Jaime Guzmán and Pinochet, which does not allow us to advance in great transformation.
We'll take a short break now. Don't go away. Welcome back. On Saturday, Mexico was commemorating the 6th anniversary of the disappearance of 43 students from the rural community of Ayotzinapa. President Andrés Manuel López Obrador recently said his government would announce new details regarding the ongoing investigation, as the Attorney General has outright dismissed the version given by the previous administration, which claimed the students were delivered to a criminal group, which later killed them and burned their bodies. Authorities have also said that members of the state security forces were part of the operation, and many of their testimonies could not be trusted. Peru is set to resume international flights on October 5th. President Martin Vizcarra said the Transport Ministry was still evaluating the routes to be reopened, and passengers arriving in the country need to have tested negative to the novel coronavirus.
We are going to start with international flights to neighboring countries and gradually expand carefully to other parts of the world. Then, the protocol to receive an international traveler will be required. Among several things, a swab test done during the past 48 hours. We could have the vaccine ready and approved in 2 or 3 months, that is, to finish phase 3. But for the vaccine to be used in Peru, we need the authorization of the corresponding authorities. This authorization can take months and perhaps even years, according to the procedures in force in the current law.
Cubans woke up on Thursday with new sanctions against their country. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, ordered to sanction the American tourists who visit the Caribbean island and stay in all kinds of government properties.
The problem is that we have been under siege our whole lives, and always history tells they will continue to impose those measures because historically Cuba sets them.
Analysts warn that Trump insists on putting more pressure on the Cuban economy in an attempt to divert attention from the situation in his own country, which has become the epicenter of COVID-19 pandemic, registering over 53,000 positive cases per day.
That the Treasury Department will prohibit U.S. travelers from staying at properties owned by the Cuban government. We're also further restricting the importation of Cuban alcohol and Cuban tobacco. These actions will ensure that U.S. dollars do not fund the Cuban regime and go directly to the Cuban people. Big difference, really.
The U.S. president's announcement came just one day after Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel denounced the consequences of the economic blockade against Cuba before the United Nations General Assembly.
The aggressiveness of the blockade has escalated to a qualitatively new level, which reinforces its condition as a real and determining impediment to the management of the economy and development of our country.
However, experts confirm that it is not coincidental that these measures were announced when there are only 40 days left for the elections in the United States.
First of all, we need to put in context that they are the gates of an election, and Florida is one of the most important states for Donald Trump, the Florida electorate, and also winning that territory. That is, we're talking about the Cuban Americans, who are mostly people who, deep down, agree with these aggressive U.S. policies towards Cuba.
This measure also restricts the importation of rum and tobacco from the Caribbean country by U.S. visitors.
And that's not all, but they also restrict people-to-people exchange, tourism trips, cultural exchanges, because the idea is basically to suffocate. They have developed throughout history some sort of manual that is all well described in a book that is called The Art of Pain, which reflects that the aggression policies of the United States are all about. They are basically looking through pressure, asphyxiation, deficiencies to achieve their objectives. And their main objective is that the Cuban Revolution should cease to exist, because deep down it is an example that another system of life is possible, and it's only 90 miles away.
Since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, the U.S. has increased pressure on Cuba. Donald Trump.
Shifting gears now, an armed attack by a militia group has left at least 15 people dead in Ethiopia's western Benishangul Gumuz region. According to the country's Human Rights Commission, the attack occurred in the early hours of Friday. The commission, however, did not say who was behind the strike. The killing is the latest incident of violence in the region. In June 2019, men in camouflage killed more than 50 people and injured 23. Vowing to hand over power within 18 months and honor international accords, the interim president and vice president of Mali's transitional government was sworn in on Friday in the capital, Bamako.
In the name of the truth of the ballot box, which must be the only norm in a democracy, I will fight uncompromisingly against votes which come at a great cost. Dear countrymen, the transition that is beginning will not call into question any of Mali's international commitments, not the agreement signed by the government.
Meanwhile, the Economic Community of West African States has confirmed that the sanctions on Mali will remain in place until the appointment of a civilian prime minister. Following the coup against Malian President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta on August 18th, the regional bloc closed borders and trade with the country.
In Accra,
the chair of the Authority of Heads of State and Government, the President of Ghana, made it very clear that when a civilian prime minister is appointed, sanctions would be lifted.
In an address to the United Nations Security Council on Friday, the UN Under-Secretary General for Political and Peace-Building Affairs offered an update on the peace process in South Sudan.
The parties agreed on a transitional period of 39 months, effective from the date of signing, which is scheduled for 3 October. Furthermore, Prime Minister Hamdok and the Abdulaziz al-Hilu faction of the Sudan People's Liberation Movement North signed the Agreement on Principles in Addis Ababa on 3 September. Those who are absent from the ongoing peace efforts in this country should be encouraged to engage in dialogue and negotiations with the transitional authorities. It is not too late.
Key players, including the Sudan Liberation Army of Abdul Wahid, SLA-AW, are yet to join the process. The agreement, still a patchwork of documents negotiated on different tracks, are yet to be woven together into a single unfractured vision of the future of Sudan. With continued armed clashes and protests in Darfur signaling the anxiety of Darfuri constituencies on the decisions being made in Khartoum and Juba.
Construction of over 5,000 illegal settlements in occupied Palestinian territories. Netanyahu on Friday called for an urgent meeting of the Supreme Urban Planning Council to approve the construction of the illegal housing in the occupied West Bank. The Israeli regime had frozen such construction for more than 6 months as the U.S. worked to broker deals to normalize ties with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. We're taking one last break, but stay with us. Welcome back. Presidential campaigns in the U.S. are advancing amidst allegations of possible fraud by President Donald Trump and concerns over the slow progress made by the Democratic Party candidate. Most recently, President Trump has taken another shot at the mail-in voting system, claiming that 80 million ballots were being sent to voters who had not requested them, calling the situation unfair and a total fraud in the making. The president has so far refused to commit to a peaceful transfer of power if he loses in November. In the meantime, supporters of former Vice President Joe Biden are calling on him to raise his campaign profile as Trump has resumed large-scale rallies. Protesters gathered in Germany's capital, Berlin, on Friday to mark the Global Day of Climate Action aimed at raising awareness on climate change.
I am super happy and motivated to get back on the streets for climate justice. When the economy and social life came to a standstill during lockdown, the climate crisis did not wait for us. We lost precious time, and that is why we need to be back on the streets again to protect the environment.
There are far fewer people than there were a year ago, but I think that people are worried of the virus, and that those who live with people at risk stay at home, but it's still a strong signal against the government's climate policy.
Global warming isn't really great, right? We are protesting against global warming so that the forests don't burn. There is a hurricane right now over the Atlantic. California is burning. Australia is burning. Is there any reason why we shouldn't be here? That could have been a better question.
A military transport plane carrying Air Force cadets crashed and burst into flames near a highway in northeastern Ukraine on Friday afternoon, killing at least 23 people on board. The Antonov AN-26 aircraft crashed on Friday morning while trying to land during a training exercise, according to a statement by the General Staff of the Armed Forces, who noted that at least 2 more people were critically injured. Ukrainian authorities confirmed that 7 officers and 21 cadets from the National Air Force University were on board. Initial reports indicate that the crash may have been caused by engine failure.
In cases, 3 to 5 million severe cases, and on average 290,000 to 650,000 deaths, respiratory-related deaths annually. This year, however, the Strategic Advisory Group of Experts on Organization have endorsed a set of interim recommendations for influenza vaccination during COVID-19. Based on a set of considerations, including alleviating additive burden on healthcare systems and vulnerable populations, and managing potentially limited supplies of influenza vaccines. SAGE has recommended and endorsed in the last week. Among the 5 risk groups, health workers and older adults are the highest priority groups for influenza vaccination during COVID-19 pandemic.
And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.com. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For TeleSUR English, I am Doris Polo. Thank you for watching.